Hello and welcome to this video presented by Advanced Data Business Systems. ADBS has been developing enterprise software since 1981 for small to large organizations. This is the Advanced Development Shell series and I am Thomas Wade Gonder. This is video 1002 in which Fred Flintstone will demonstrate to us how he uses the entity form in the Advanced Development Shell. This video is based on version 1.23 of the evaluation database and contains some nonsensical data for demonstrating concepts rather than an actual database tailored for one specific type of organization. I will be following Fred Flintstone in his new capacity at the Slate Rock and Gravel Company. As a trainee, Fred will learn to preview records in the entity form. He will later do the basics to add another character using the same form. Finally, Laura, our lovely data administrator, will log in and adjust an entry made by Fred. Videos 1112 and 1122 will cover in a bit more detail logging in and getting a job started from the menus. Don't worry about the various videos mentioned here. We will summarize them at the end of this presentation so you can easily explore deeper into each topic. Let's get this demo started. Here's the typical Access startup page as seen in Access 2021. I'll double-click on this demo file. Fred has been brought in from the quarry to start learning about front office sales tasks. This is new technology for Fred, and we're making him, for now, do actual sales orders with paper and pencil, another new technology for him. As a trainee, Fred is learning how to use the entity form to enter data on new customers that come into the store. But before he can do that, Fred has to log in to the Advanced Development Shell, or ADS. For now, we'll just quickly log Fred in and get him into the entity form. E0022 tab, yabba, tab, enter, quick review of the data, and continue, and into the entity form. We'll get rid of the menu that's in the background and center the form. Video 1132 will explain all the fields on this main form, while video 1134 will explain the related forms that Fred will use today. If you look down here at the next command button, you'll see that there are small black dots surrounding it. This means that it has focus. This is an Access command button. When this command button has focus, you can just press Enter over and over again to preview the different records. Previewing means you can see the records but not edit or change them. So we're safe from Fred making changes to the data for an entity as long as he's just previewing. Enter, 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 enter. Notice that there are a variety of entity types. It's not just people. Fred briefly previews each record and then presses the Enter key again. That is, until one particular record grabs Fred's attention. Yabba dabba doo. Who is this handsome hunk? Fred reviews some of the data fields that are in the form. He can see that he's a fictitious human cartoon character, male and man. Well, they got that right. He's Mr. Fred Flintstone. He can scroll down and see how he's to be greeted, which is Fred, how his correspondence will appear, when he was born, where he was born, what his primary language is, and what code he has, BR1. He also can double-click on the image of himself and see the application behind it. And in related forms, he can click on Group. There's really nothing interesting here, so he closes it, goes on to Note, sees a general note that Fred is the main character in the Flintstones. Okay, whatever that is. Close. Can see his identification. Oh, this makes a little more sense. There's my driver's license. It's my driver's license number, and it was issued by Hanna-Barbera. This is it. Goes down here to relation. Ah, it's Wilma. Fred is the husband of Mrs. Wilma Flintstone. He can click on next and see Pebbles, his friend Barney, and that he is a member of the Loyal Order of the Water Buffaloes. Close it. He goes to other name and sees that he is an AKA known by the general public of Pablo Picapiedras. What's that? Well, down here in notes, we can see that Fred is known by this name in the Spanish dubbed episodes of the Flintstones. Okay, we'll close that. Fred continues admiring his record when a man comes rushing across the yard and bursts in, "Quick, I need a bag of rocks to save Fort Knox from going nuclear." And Fred says, "Okay, pal." So he goes down here to new, clicks on it. What's your name, friend? Bond. James Bond. So Fred types in James, tab, Bond, and Alt-S, and saves the record for James Bond. He closes out the record and goes out into the store to help James with his bag of rocks. When he comes back, he brings the menus back up, and he decides to clean up some of the data in this record. Well, he's been taught to hit search and then type in BOND, search, view, and there's James Bond's record. He goes in and edits it and changes him to fictitious, like he is, and he seems to be a male, and we'll leave it at that for now. Saves the record, closes it, and goes back to his duties in the store. The next day, Mr. Bond casually walks across the yard, enters the store, says, "Hello, Fred." And Fred says, "Hello, Mr. Bond, James Bond." And he searches for Bond, and search, and view. He says, "How are you today?" "Oh, great. Thanks again for your help yesterday. I just wanted to let you know that that bag of rocks really helped out. And just to give you my thanks." And Fred says, "That's great, Mr. Bond. If you've got just a minute, we can finish filling out your entity form. Have you got a moment?" "Sure." So Fred goes into edit, and all the fields turn green, and the field that he's working in goes to gold. And he goes, "Mr. Bond, I assume you like Mr.?" And yeah, that's fine. "Mr. Bond, do you happen to have a middle name?" And Mr. Bond goes, "No." So Fred puts in 2 double quotes and a tab. The double quotes told the system that Mr. Bond does not have a middle name, rather than we just don't know what it is. We know that he doesn't have one. "Mr. Bond, do you have a junior or senior after your name?" "Well, I'm a lawyer." "Well, then let's make you Esquire." And Fred knows that Mr. Bond likes to be called Bond James Bond, so he puts in 424 and tab, and now we have Bond James Bond as a salutation, but his correspondence will be Mr. James Bond Esquire. "When were you born, Mr. Bond?" "In 1930, on September 13th. Fred puts in the information in the ISO format, hits tab, and he says, "Were you born in the United States?" "No, Scotland, Fred." And so, "No, I don't have Scotland." Mr. Bond says, "Try United Kingdom." Fred types in the first part of United, and Alt down arrow looks down, and there's United Kingdom of Great Britain. Hits tab. Mr. Bond obviously hasn't died, and his primary language is English. Yes. He says, "Mr. Bond, you're male. How do you identify?" "As a man." Fred says, "I thought so." "And do you have a code or a number that you use?" "Yes, Fred, it's 007. "Is that 007 or 007? "It's 007, Fred." So Fred puts that in. And who gave you that code? Well, it was Her Majesty's Secret Service. Fred goes, great, we got you in the system now, Mr. Bond. When you come back, we can serve you even faster and you can be a member of our frequent Rock Buyers Club. All right, goodbye, Mr. Bond. Goodbye, Fred. Have a great day. Boom, saves the record, closes it, and we're done with Mr. Bond for today. Fred, the next day, is again working the store, and he sees Mr. Bond racing across the field. So he presses 1 and enter to bring up the entity form. He shrinks the menu in the background, goes to search, looks up 007, Alt A for search down here, Alt V for view James Bond. He's selected even though there's a bunch of other James. Alt V brings up the record. Mr. Bond bursts in, quick, Fred, I need another bag of rocks to bean Joe Zippo. Fred says, whoa, 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 Mr. Bond, hold on a second. If we know you're going to use rocks against a victim, we need to get that victim into the system and everything registered because rocks are a dangerous weapon and the government wants to know all about it. Mr. Bond says, okay, Fred. So Fred goes to new. What's this victim's name? Joe, tab, Zippo. He goes, okay, great. Saves the record. Highlights the ID and Control C. Goes to previous and then goes to relation form. Creates a new relation. The relation type, Mr. Bond, who is this Joe guy to you? Well, he's my nemesis. And Fred says, no, I haven't got that. So I'll just put him as a friend for now. And he does Control V to paste in, tab, and he puts in a dash for today at this very moment as the relationship is created. Saves the record. Everything looks good here in the relationship, so he closes it. And he goes to next, edits, makes this guy fictitious also. And is he Latino, Mr. Bond? Well, I think so. Okay, that's good enough. Saves the record, closes it, and they go out into the field to get Mr. Bond his second bag of rocks. Fred has mentioned to Laura, the data administrator for the Application Universal module, which the entity form is part of, that he set Zippo as a friend of Mr. Bond, but that he needs to be a nemesis. Laura understands what Fred needs done and does it at the workstation that Fred is using. She's not afraid of Fred watching what she is doing, and we'll see why in a moment. Laura logs out Fred, changes the login to Spanish because that's how she likes to see things. She puts in her number and her password, accept, briefly looks over the information, mostly that it's her, continues, and Laura is in 2 different user groups. So she selects the AU Data Administrator group and gets a different menu. She goes to the Supervision menu, the Main menu, and then the Entity form. She looks up this Bond guy that Fred was talking about. Buscar is the same as search, and ver is the same as view. She goes down to the relation, and she sees that, not in Spanish, but in English, because data doesn't change, only the prompts and titles. She sees that this guy, Mr. Zippo, is a friend of James Bond. So she goes into here and clicks on the down arrow and looks up and down. Yeah, she didn't think she'd find Nemesis. Yeah, it should be right here after friend. So she right-clicks and says view. And she's going to copy the friend record to a new one. Notice it has 2468, so she does a copy. It has a new different number. It's a relationship. So she goes down here to friend and changes that to Nemesis, saves it, guardar, and closes. And now she goes and edits this relationship record and changes friend to nemesis. She now saves that, closes, and logs out. The reason she wasn't afraid of Fred seeing that information, because when Fred logs in and goes to the entity form and he looks up this 007 and presses search and view and goes to the relation and tries to right click on this nemesis, he gets a message, you do not have permission to use this job. So it's safe from Fred at this point until he's been trained a little bit better. We close, and log out. And that is the end of this demonstration part of the video. Thank you for watching this video, and here are the links mentioned earlier that will help you understand in greater detail some of the topics briefly mentioned here.